And clear history. Oh, we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is I, your host, Lateral, aka @Lateral on the Twitter. It has been a crazy week. Going to focus pretty much on football the entire episode. We have phenomenal guests. We got LQ from Real Deal Fantasy. We got Scott Barrett, the dude from Fantasy Points. It's going to be a hell of a show. But first, I think I want to address two things that'll be a little more serious. Obviously, some stuff went down in the fantasy community this week. I don't need to get into the details of that, but I think I do need to say that obviously we at the Lateral do not condone it. We condemn it. We are glad that those who were victims of it came out and felt comfortable saying something to the community. And I think the community, for the large part, responded in kind. And, you know, for as rough as fantasy Twitter can get at times, I was proud of how we handled things for the most part. And I hope that we continue to handle things just as well. And the other thing I felt that, at least in my time, went really well was the response, obviously, to the verdict in the George Floyd case. And I think a lot of people had the right attitude. It's not justice, but it is what was needed. It is what was right, and it's only a small first step. That being said, let's move on to the football. It's been a crazy week. As I mentioned, major things happening, including Wayne Gallman's on the 49ers, baby. Let's go. I got my running back. I got my shares. I dropped Tevin Coleman for him. I picked him up. I've been like, Wayne Gallman's the dude. Like, saw what he did in New York. Every time he is asked to step up, he steps up. And now he is in that 49ers backfield. You know Raheem Mostert's going to get injured around week 7. I love Raheem Mostert. I hope it's not true, but it feels like it's going to happen. And as much as I love Jeff Wilson Jr., and I'm a big Jeff Wilson Jr. fan, like, people should be stashing Wayne Gallman. I don't think this will be the last time in 2021 his name is relevant. Another group of names that will be relevant in 2021 is also the Bengals wide receivers, and the speculation on what will happen there is just tearing apart fantasy Twitter. You know, will they draft Chase? Will they draft Penny Sewell? Do they care if Joe Burrow is able to walk 2 years from now? Do they care about our fantasy teams? Because if so, how dare they draft Jamar and ruin all the T. Higgins stonks? Like, it's going to be interesting. I think the wise thing to do is probably see if you can hedge your bets. If you've got Tyler Boyd, if you got T. Higgins, see if you can get something of comparable value, but with higher upside. And if you can't, hold, because there's no point on just giving up on that. I think we got to be smart with this, but, you know, in another week, if you wanted T. Higgins and all of a sudden there's no Jamar Chase, now it's going to be really hard to get T. Higgins. So that's the other thing. If you want to make your move, you got to make your move now. And speaking of things that made moves, Peter Schrager's mock draft dropped the other day. And the screams could be heard around the world from just whether it was, it's tough to look past the Washington football team taking Travis Etienne. I think every Antonio Gibson truther on the face of the planet collectively lost their mind. I know there was some other stuff there. Again, as a Niners fan, like mocking Mac Jones, they're still like not thrilled about it, but it is what it is. I am glad at least that he didn't have the Patriots getting mocked a QB, though he did have the Patriots trading up to get Devonta Smith. And like, if you are someone who has N'Keal Harry or either of the tight ends or any other, like if you have any part of the New England offense and they draft Devonta Smith, who I think is really good, like it's just going to be a disaster all around. They will have literally too many mouths to feed. Obviously, it'll shake out a bit, but like Bill Belichick doesn't care about your fantasy team. He never cared about it when it came to running backs, and it seems like he ain't going to care about it when it comes to wide receivers. If it seems that Peter Schrager is correct, And he's a reputable name in the industry. So chances are he's not crazy. And another reputable name in the industry is my next guest, LQ from Real Deal Fantasy. And there he is on the screen. LQ, what's good, my man?
What's up, man? I'm glad to be here. I'm ready to talk some football, ready to have a good time. I mean, hey, I'm out of beer, but I see you sipping on some.
Yeah, finishing the last of that St. Patty's Day beer. You know, it's gotta go somewhere because my girlfriend doesn't drink it, so that six-pack was all mine.
Full send.
But anyway, man, it's a blast to have you here.
Yep.
Loving the content you've been putting out. So I kind of wanted to, just start a little simple. Again, you're the founder of Real Deal Fantasy. You got the HQ blog and the YouTube channel. If they go to your Twitter, which is at Real Deal Fantasy, they should be able to find the links to all of that. But how'd you get started playing fantasy sports? I'm curious.
I started playing ages ago. I want to say 2013. Whatever year where, AJ Green and Julio Jones were big things. And surprisingly enough, my late round flyer was Jacoby Jones. That's just say that's how long I've been playing. And I think it was Jeremy Hill as my RB1. So yeah, that long.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely puts a timestamp on it.
Yeah. But I finished third that year. My first ever year playing.
That's good.
I finished third. And I think everybody has that same story. I feel like they always make it to the playoffs with the first year luck. And hey, after that, the year after that, I finished dead last. But I didn't give up. I kept playing. So that's basically how I got into it, and a lot of my buddies at work were talking about fantasy football, this and this and that. At the time, I was a big soccer guy, Fergie on the way out, Wayne Rooney killing it, doing his damn thing, and Robin Van Persie doing his thing, the Dutchman. And, that was just such a great time, in my life. And then fantasy football came in. So that's how I got started.
Well, I'm glad fantasy football is there because we don't talk about Van Persie on this show. That is a no zone there.
How about Ozil? You talk about Ozil?
I think Ozil got a bad rap. I think it was time for him to go. I think it was a really bad situation. I have nothing against him as a person. I'm glad he's able to be back home playing. Again, I genuinely liked him, but it was definitely time to go. So fantasy sports.
Yep.
You're getting into it. I'm curious. You got PPR listed in your Twitter bio. When was your first experience with PPR?
Literally when I started playing. I only
knew
PPR existed. Yeah. So I got into the leagues that I was playing in the first couple of years. I only knew and only thought PPR existed. And then it was this 1 year I agreed at a work league. I was like, yeah, sure. I'll join your league. I'm thinking it's PPR. The entire time, the first, I want to say 2-3 weeks. And I realized I was like, dude, why am I not getting the same points that I'm getting in this league and that league? So I'm like, yo, what's different here? Showing my buddy. He was like, oh, you're in a standard league. That's trash. And I'm just like, what the hell is a standard league? I thought PPR was the standard. And then I lost that league because they had this terrible ass rule where it's a 2-week head-to-head, for the championship. I'm thinking I won. I'm screaming, yeah, I won, blah, blah, blah. And then we face each other in week 17, which is why? Why are we doing this right now? So yeah, that was my terrible experience in Scarred for Life standard. So if you invite me to your standard format league, I will block you. Done deal.
I have to say that's genuinely impressive. I don't think I experienced PPR in probably 2017.
Really?
It's my preferred format, I have to say. I'm a fan of it. I think with some of the older school, the more casual player, standard was the way it was, and it's tough to move out from that.
But the game is evolving. You got to understand. Running backs are catching passes now. You're getting running backs that are catching at least 40 to 50 passes. So it's
I mean, I totally agree. Again, and I think the other thing was I had some guys who were just getting into fantasy. So if they're the commissioner of their league, they don't really know what they're doing. They may do all sorts of things making kick return yards count for players on their points and making Eddie Royal a freaking wide receiver 1.
Block.
It was not okay.
Yeah.
But what is more than okay is your absolute fire fantasy content. So how'd you get into that? What started that trip?
So around the time where I was like just getting introduced, I was finding myself actually winning money from these leagues and like really knowing what I'm doing now and like feeling confident enough to, you know, basically show other people like, yo, I just won this league, you know, blah, blah, blah. I think this was a good pickup, this and this and that. And then that turned into people actually coming to me, asking me questions. So it started with my cousins. It started with people I worked with, like people that I knew that I saw on a regular basis that also play fantasy. But it was weird because I was like, dude, I play you this week. I'm not about to give you advice to beat me. So it's like, it started off like that. And I turned it into like, basically like I was getting frustrated, but then I'm like, I need to put this in one place. Like I need to put all this information, all this thought in like one place. So surprisingly enough, if you go to my Facebook right now and like my old posts, I start posting like fantasy advice, like starts and sits. Like I think I was only doing start and sit. That was it. I wasn't like going into like waiver wire. I wasn't going into like trade values and all that other stuff. Like it was strictly start and sit because that's what everybody would ask me. So once I put it like on my Facebook, and I'm like, I should just make like videos. Like honestly, I feel comfortable in front of a camera. Like not saying that, you know, I started off the ground running and like I don't have any cringy moments of like me being on camera doing episodes because everybody has that. Sure. So I keep my very first, you know, experience on camera on my YouTube channel if you dig that far back. So I feel like, you know, once I got the confidence and I wanted to put it on YouTube, that's why I was like, I think I'm going to start doing this. I think I'm going to start being constant of putting content out of, you know, fantasy work. And then there's Nick, you know, Ercolano, Big Dog's Gotta Eat. I found his channel and I reached out to him like email. So this is like when he only had like 2,000, 3,000 subscribers, which is a lot, you know, to me back then. So I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? And I find out he's from Jersey, which is crazy. So I was like, that's why we're so relatable. We have the same language. Like we had the same like swagger. We had the same vibe. So once I recognized that, I emailed him one day. I was like, hey man, how do you do this? Like, what do I use? What mic do I get? What lighting, et cetera, et cetera. And he just gave me like this long email, just like,
that's awesome.
You know, it's of everything you need to do to actually start creating content. So once he gave me that, like, wow, boom, you know, this is what it is. I took that and ran with it. And then the rest is history after that. I mean, I'm on year 4 right now. I think this is the year that I've been taking it the most serious, and hopefully this can turn into something great. And maybe I could stop doing my daytime job.
What do you do for your daytime job?
I'm a Tesla mechanic.
Oh, wow. That's actually really cool. Yeah, actually, I know someone that works for the company. At one point, I played Star Fox with Zach, who's the CFO.
Nice.
Because my mom and his mom went to work. They worked together. So
really?
Yeah. So like there is literally like this one day where I like was chilling and playing Star Fox with the future CFO of Tesla and some of his friends just out of sheer coincidence. So you talk about, you know, the content, which of course, fire content, the importance of like, you know, being able to get in front of camera, really find what you're good at. So what is the importance of like, I guess, making sure that your brand is always present in your fantasy content? Like, how did you really land on like, this is the thing that I got to make sure I'm doing? And like, what tips maybe do you have for someone when cultivating their own brand?
I literally like, I've said this so many times, so many people have said it to me, and it's about being yourself. Do not be something you are not. Not all of us can get in front of a camera and show our personality and mix it with, you know, fantasy content. Not all of us can, you know, do a podcast where it's just audio and feel comfortable, you know, reading your notes and have it not sound like you're a robot, like it's a script. So it's all about what works for you. What do you want to do? And my brand is me. It's literally, you get everything from it. You get my personality, you get my attitude, my frustration, you get my happy moments, my, you know, depressing moments of trading for Odell Beckham and he burns you in the playoffs. Like, don't want to go there. But the thing is like, you get me, you get my personality. If we were to hang out in public in real life, I'm the same way on camera, off camera. The same tweets, crazy tweets you get of my chaotic life, my lifestyle, you're going to get that if you're with me at a party, at a bar, or wherever the case may be. So it's about fixing and putting your lifestyle together to with something you enjoy doing. And fantasy just happens to be something I really enjoy doing, and I could just be myself and not have to try to be, Mr. like robot cringy moments of trying to be somebody that I'm not, you know what I mean? So that's the only best advice. And that's like the most important thing about doing anything, about networking and making new friends in the industry. Like, don't be something you're not, just be you, man. If you're a piece of shit, be a piece of shit. Some people might like it. You know what I mean? If you're an asshole, you be an asshole. So there's that.
I mean, it's working for me so far. I got to say, like, the brand is definitely strong on that front. No, I mean, it's definitely worked for you. Like, yeah. I think you have built a clear, a concise brand. It's easy to access, and I have enjoyed accessing it, including your Super Women in Sports series, which I think is really cool. And yes. You just had, I think, Sam on recently. So tell me, like, what was your thought process behind creating that series? Like, what made you go, this is something that has to be out here?
Man, listen, like, over the summer, I think that's where, last summer, where I started seeing like the most chaotic things happen. So like, started seeing women that actually were being attacked because of their takes, being questioned, their research process, just attacking them personally, like saying really like crazy things to them, like disgusting things, sexual things, like why are you attacking her? And somewhat I related to that, being that, my first start into putting out content, like as an African-American male in a white male dominant, market, I felt like I was being attacked for the same thing that I'm saying that this guy on TV, the only difference is he's white and I'm black. So I really felt that energy on the Facebook groups. Like, the Facebook groups are the most toxic fantasy groups on the planet. Like, literally, you still have people that draft on a notepad. They don't use their phone to draft. They don't use the laptop to draft. They're going to somebody's house on a notepad, and these are their players for the season. And it's wow, caveman. So that whole series sparked up a while ago. I just now, put it in motion, being the recent events that have happened in the last 2-3 months of just crazy stuff. It doesn't make sense why any of this stuff is going on. So in a way, I was like really frustrated to the point where, like, you know what? I want to make these trolls mad. Like, I want them to be madder. I want them to keep punching the air. So I'm going to, reach out to some of my friends and some people that are doing what we do in the fantasy space. They're writing, they're doing video content, etc. I'm going to put them on a screen, and then I'm going to highlight their achievements. I'm going to highlight everything they're doing, what they have next, and talk fantasy with them, chop it up, give a welcome hug, like basically saying it's okay to be here with us because we got your back. The fantasy community has everybody's back. That's one of the best things that's like I fell in love with this fantasy community. Like, we're all coming together for when one scumbag says something crazy as hell, we attack them and get them out of there because they don't belong there. So that whole series was like literally sparked off of just frustration of just seeing them being attacked for what? Like, why? Like, there's no apparent reason why you're doing this. You're just doing it because she's a woman and she knows more than you. She has more followers than you, or whatever the reason is. That's what it ultimately comes down to. And like, I'm really sick of it, in this fantasy community. I wish I could just, give them a boarding pass. Like, hey, meet me here.
Yeah, I will say, so I'm actually not on Facebook. I haven't had a Facebook in years. I don't think I will ever have a Facebook again. Ooh. So I will say that experience is a little foreign to me. And I'm lucky enough that I think the experience of being targeted based on a demographic is foreign to me, at least in the fantasy creation space, because I'm Jewish. So like, the thing with what content I put out, what persona I put out, like, it's not something that's like super apparent and can be easily attacked. Whereas like, the real world, it's unfortunately a little bit different story.
Yeah.
Whereas like people like you, people like Sam, I see it in her stuff all the time where it's just like, oh, okay, I found this one thing that says you are completely illegitimate no matter what. It's like, well, okay, did you take any time to see if they're any good at what they do? Because that's what you should be judging. And like, I got to say, like, for me personally, at least, like, some of the best fantasy content I'm seeing is from women, like, Cooterdoodle, Sam Holt, like all these people. It's like, and the other day, Scott Simpson put out something that's like, shooting your shot, trying to get like the big name following. I'm like, I want Stephania Bell to follow me, man. Stefania's awesome. And I got it. Like Stephania Bell follows me. And to me, that's like the dopest thing ever.
Yeah.
We have had you on. We've had Andrew Metcalf. I believe I'm getting the last name right. Lateral
he's part of the Real Deal Fantasy. He's my lead dynasty writer.
He's great. I got to like talk a bit about Bengals wide receivers with him on Twitter earlier today. Like, you guys are some of the most intelligent stuff I see out there. And it's just like the idea that, again, we all know why it happens, but like the idea that it happens is still just as ridiculous regardless.
2021, man, because there's plenty of times where I'll post a video and honestly, I don't even care anymore. I'll post a video and just leave it there. It'll be kind of like a content dump. And then I'll get somebody saying, this is the worst thing I ever read. Or watched. And I'm like, dude, you didn't even watch it for you to be saying A, B, and C, and D. Like, why are you doing this? So get out of my way, man. I'm the troll slayer. If you ever have a problem, man, hit me up. I will take you down to a science. I should be a therapist.
I will definitely keep you in the contacts list for the next time the trolls pop up on the timeline.
Serious, you better ask around. I'm the troll slayer. I will break them down in public, and they'll
love it. I love it. I love it. I also loved what you had to say about Matt Ryan and the Falcons fantasy future. Read that article recently, so I'm curious. What do you think the Falcons are going to do with that number 4 pick? Let's just get that right out the way.
So here's the thing with that number 4 pick. Like, they could possibly land Pitts. Pitts in that offense will look amazing, but they're probably going to get a quarterback for the future because Matt Ryan's 35. How many good years? Like, we're not even talking fantasy at this point. How many good years like are left in him for the Falcons to get back to the Super Bowl? Because we honestly seen them go to the Super Bowl and they blew it and they lost. So after that, it's just been a constant decline. They've been finishing 3rd in the division. They just kind of been mediocre, mid-tier, even with Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, all these guys, playing at a high level. And it's like, do we really want Matt Ryan for another 3 years? I don't know. So with that number 4 pick, I think you definitely get the quarterback for the future. I don't know who. Don't ask me. It could be Wilson. It could be Trey Lance. It could be Fields. We don't know what can happen. We've seen the Bears trade up one spot, in the draft to get his name that shall not be mentioned and look over Mahomes. We know the story. So we don't know what could possibly happen. So I don't know the exact quarterback they should take. But I think with that pick, man, I do you really pass on Pitts? Do you pass on Pitts at a position you need?
I don't think they do. I don't think they do. I think Arthur Smith, personally, he's done it with one washed up QB before. I think he's going to try it again. I think he wants Pitts. I think they want Pitts. I think that's what they're locked on. I think the wild card is trading down if someone offers enough. Like, I think they will not send in that pick until the last possible second, because if Carolina goes like, hey man, we'll give you 8, we'll give you like this, that, and the third, they're going to be like, yeah, at 8, we're still getting someone pretty damn good. Like, all right, done.
I literally
maybe at 8, you get that quarterback of the future.
Yeah,
then
maybe
you got an additional, I think we've seen with guys like, I think Chris Ballard in Indy, like, I was reading something, I think either today or yesterday, where he's just like, the draft is a crapshoot. So I trade down to get as many shots at the crapshoot as I possibly can. And that's why it works. And he referenced Ozzie Newsome. It's like Ozzie Newsome really started. It's like, get your comp picks, trade down, get your extra picks, take as many shots at that dartboard as you can. So I think Pitts is a real possibility. I think it's what I'm leaning. Quarterbacks obviously possible. Real quick before we bring on Scott, we'll maybe even see what he thinks about the Falcons while we have him on. But what do you think the fantasy outlook will be for the Falcons wide receivers, specifically Ridley and Julio, if they draft a QB that possibly replaces Matt Ryan halfway through the season? Like, do you think it goes down, goes up? Are they just talented enough that it doesn't really matter?
I think, you know what? I can't see a quarterback, even with that number 4 pick, sitting Matt Ryan down, because Matt Ryan is still serviceable. I honestly don't.
Do you think it's going to be a 1-year ride the bench at least anyway, barring injury?
Barring injury, yeah, it might be 1 to 2 years, to be honest, because I think you put that fire under Matt Ryan's ass and he'll get back to playing at a higher level. Because now let's talk fantasy. I have this curse, this Matt Ryan curse that's been going on since 2012, where he's hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. And as the last 2 years, he's kind of just been decline. So if we look at Matt Ryan's fantasy ranking since 2012, it is hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. So I definitely think now you put that fire back in his ass, he'll start performing at a higher level. He'll start performing, at a better level, even, with the quarterback behind him, knowing he's going to take his job. So we don't know, honestly, have we ever seen Matt Ryan in position where he had to coach up a young quarterback? Like, no, I don't think we've seen that yet, right?
No, I mean, I think if anything, Matt Ryan has been behind an older guy. Mm-hmm. And otherwise it's just been like junk on the bench.
Exactly. So he's been safe for so many years now. So it's like,
True.
I honestly don't see him sitting down to any top prospect, even if it's Fields.
Possibly a redraft sleeper at QB then, especially if they get Pitts and have a really talented offense. Well, let's bring on Scott Barrett, aka the director of Dank Stats at Fantasy Points. Scott, thank you so much for coming on, man. It means the world. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, hey, what's going on, guys?
What's up, man?
Just talking some
setup's
Falcons.
Looking crispy as hell. Oh my god, I got like empty boxes back here behind me, but that's fresh.
Yeah, we were talking about the Torrey Holt jersey. With
he follows me on Twitter.
Yes, sir.
That's my awesome. proudest follows.
Did you get Isaac Bruce too, or
just
Marshall
Torrey,
Falk?
Just Torrey.
Okay, just Torrey.
Just get the dude.
Torrey's the one who knows what's up. Torrey's the one who knows what's up, apparently. So real quick, we've been talking about the Falcons' fantasy future. If they draft a quarterback, how do you think the outlook changes for the wide receiver duo, Ridley and Julio? Do you think they're just so talented it's not really going to matter? Do you think Ryan's going to be there for a year anyway? Curious as to your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm hearing they want Trey Lance. If Trey Lance isn't there, they're prepared to take Kyle Pitts, and they don't think Trey Lance is going to be there at the moment. If they were to draft Trey Lance, I think you're right. I think it's going to be a situation where he sits for year one. Just the way the contract's tied up with Matt Ryan, I don't see them at all moving on from him until, conceivably next year. Nor do I see Trey Lance pushing him out, right out of the gates.
Yeah, I think actually Trey Lance would be a perfect one if they're going to take a QB of the future, because I think the upside's clearly there. And the feeling that like maybe he needs just a little more time to perfect the product is also there. So maybe the fan base will be a little bit more understanding, though fan bases, as we've seen, like they'll be like, shiny new toy, put it out now.
But do you pass on Pitts, man? Like, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do that.
What would you do? Scott, you're GM of the Falcons. Are you passing up on Pitts, or are you taking that quarterback of the future?
Yeah, I tweeted about this. It's a case of competing incentives where you have the GM who is naturally going to have, especially because he was just hired this year, more of a long-term outlook.
Yeah.
And so he's going to think about, okay, the defense is a total mess. If I could trade this pick back, get another first, get, 2-2, something like that, why don't I go that route? Or I go the QB of the future, so there's no lag period where, all right, Matt Ryan clearly can't complete a pass. This team is garbage. And then they're thinking about moving on from me. The team is just, it's not looking pretty. We went to win now, and our reserves are depleted, and the team stinks. And then you have the head coach who was brought in, an offensive-minded head coach. It's probably better for him if the team only won 4 games, but the offense was a top 5 offense, than if he went perfectly 8-8 or 8 and whatever, now that we have 17 games. And so he's just drooling over, an offense that's stacked with Kyle Pitts, with Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones. And that is probably the route I go. I had a tweet in December. I said, I'm tweeting this once, and I'm not talking about this guy without a paywall until after the draft. Kyle Pitts is going to be in the Hall of Fame. I haven't felt this sure about a prospect coming out since Christian McCaffrey, and all that's still true. I'm madly in love with Kyle Pitts and his upside, and I just still go back to his tape constantly because it's so fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a dynasty league with Herms, my partner over at the Lateral, and like he'll tell you like all year I've been like, I might take Kyle Pitts 102 in a 1 QB league. I might do it. I like him that much. I ended up trading for Noah Fant, so now I'm like leaning Jamar Chase or Najee Harris because I think they're also borderline generational guys, though not quite in the same way as Pitts. Pitts is like, as you said, like almost a Hall of Fame lock. Like the first comp I heard for him was Kellen Winslow. I'm like, okay, you have my attention. Like, I don't think Najee will quite be the same way. But that's the thing that interests me the most, I think, was honestly that you said they're thinking Trey Lance won't be there.
Yeah, I mean, the same source told me 8 days ago that Mac Jones is a lock to San Francisco. Now he's saying he's hearing that he thinks it's Trey Lance, and Atlanta thinks it's Trey Lance, and they're prepared to take Pitts if that's the case.
I hope it's Trey Lance. I'm a Niners fan, so I'm like, I hope it's Trey Lance. I'd be so excited about that. I love the talent that I see. So again, thank you so much for being here. As I ask all of the guests that come on this show, how did you get started in playing fantasy sports? What was your first fantasy league?
Yeah, my stepdad invited me into his buddy's league that had been going on for, like 8 or so years. When I was in the 8th grade, and I just immediately fell in love. It was me and a bunch of 36-year-old dudes who were phenomenal shit talkers. That's what I love the most is like, they talk so much shit and they gave it to me and they didn't hold back because I'm, 12 years old, 13 years old. They just laid into me. And I was just so hungry to prove myself. And then I got, the buddy who stepped aside for a year went back, so they kicked me out, and I was heartbroken. And then I did a fantasy baseball league with my dad for, 15 years, something like that. I actually started in the industry as a fantasy baseball writer. It was my first love. My dad was phenomenal at it. He was like a Wall Street hotshot who had just retired, and this gave him something to, an outlet. And he worked the waiver wire like a day trader, and he just kicked all of our asses. He would drop big name guys and we're like, what are you doing? And he would just ride that waiver wire and crush us.
Was he a big sabermetrics guy then?
No, not even, but he knew all that stuff intuitively really well. And I have somewhat of a Wall Street background too. And there's a significant amount of overlap that I'll constantly talk about in my articles just because it's so obvious.
No, I mean, I definitely get that. I think Daryl Morey was kind of the same way. He was doing financial investment stuff and then parlayed it, I think, into a, obviously now a career as a GM. So I definitely get the comp. What's your baseball team? Baseball team and favorite player of all time?
Yeah, shout out to New Jersey. I'm a Mets fan. Favorite baseball player of all time, Bartolo Colon, Ray Ordonez, Mo Vaughn.
I gotta say, someone who lived in Philly when they won the pennant in 2009, not the biggest Mets guy, but I do love me some Bartolo Colon. That home
legend. Run was one of the best days of my. That was just so exciting. We tried to go to all the Bartolo Colon games we could. Actually, my real favorite is probably R.A. Dickey. The first fantasy article I ever wrote was predicting the R.A. Dickey Cy Young in his Cy Young season. Week 1. I mean, I just got lucky and it was a half joking article. But after that, he's going to be my favorite for forever.
No, I mean, the knuckleballer was a legend as well. So you said you got your start doing fantasy baseball content. How did you get into creating fantasy football content then? Yeah.
So, I started off on WordPress, or really I just started off, my buddy created a blog, and then I was writing these 20-page papers and procrastinating. I just would rip him apart in the comments section. One of his things was Derek Jeter's the greatest shortstop of all time. He's a big Yankees homer. I commented no. Archie Vaughn is the greatest shortstop of all time. And I wrote 1,500 words, high on Adderall, procrastinating on my article. And then I ended up turning that into an article for Number Fire. But yeah, I started at Number Fire. I wrote for free for a number of years. And then just all the money, all the clicks was in football. And I was all right, let me give this a shot. I was garbage at it for a really long time. And then at a certain point, I wrote this Frank Gore article and everything just clicked. And JJ Zacharyson, my editor, wanted to like hug me. He was like, you get it. You like finally you turn the corner. And like from then on, it was just like a downhill battle. And then I never looked back at baseball from there.
And real quick, which decade of Frank Gore's career was that? Just want to clarify for the listeners and the viewers.
I think the 4th decade.
Jesus.
Okay, actually, real quick on the Frank Gore subject, do you think he gets to play football professionally with his kid? Do you think he makes it long enough?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, at this point, his allure just kind of has to be like you have a coach who can come in, take like 5 snaps, 2 carries a game. But no, I mean, he's probably, maybe 1 more year and that's it.
Okay. Well, let's move on. I was reading your Twitter thread. Slot wide receivers do not matter. And I saw there were a couple things that were interesting. Speaking of running backs, I saw there was no repeat for a top running back yardage year until Ray Rice, who was number 16 and 17 on the list. So like what I mean is like no running back from numbers 1 to 15 repeated as having one of the best yardage seasons in the.
Yeah, I think that was a chart of like the top 25 yards from scrimmage seasons for running backs over the past 15 years or whatever. Yeah, that was an NFL thread. That wasn't a fantasy thread, but really it was just kind of, having some fun, poking some holes in the running backs don't matter, phenomenon. Just like all the arguments that you want to say with running backs hold even more true for slot wide receivers. Like, I don't know how true that is, but just like all the arguments hold up extremely well in terms of replaceability, draft capital, declining contracts, things of that nature, different studies that have been done to quantify the value of certain positions, predictability. And you see that. So, draft capital is really important for running backs. You say it's really replaceable. You could find a Raheem Mostert or Phillip Lindsay or James Robinson, on the streets, but like realistically that doesn't really happen. And, the best guys, specifically the high end guys are running backs drafted in round 1 or round 2. And just from a dynasty perspective, draft capital is key. It's the best predictor of talent and production for fantasy and especially for running backs. These guys don't want to be weak at any position. And with a running back, definitely don't pay a guy big money when he's 26 years old, just out of his rookie contract. But in a rookie contract, it might make a little bit more sense. These guys are immediate contributors, unlike with the wide receiver and tight end positions. Just get them in their prime.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that was something that was like, it was the takeaway I took was look for running backs drafted in the first 2 rounds, as you said. Look for ones that are on their rookie deal. It seemed like the majority of them that were producing those top yardage situations were on their rookie deals. And like maybe don't try and target the guy who had the top yardage the year before, because it seems statistically, at least, it's very unlikely that he will necessarily have the top yardage or a historic yardage season the following year. Because as I said, there wasn't really that repeat. I thought there was incredibly interesting data set to go through. And then I thought it was also something you sort of saw with the outside wide receivers, where outside wide receivers, like again, the better the draft capital, the better they tended to do in terms of having a top yardage season. You wanted guys who were on the younger side. Like once you hit that wall of 30 years, it seemed like it had really dropped off. Whereas for slot receivers, it didn't seem it was the same. It was like, you want maybe a guy like a Wes Welker or a Julian Edelman. It's like, this guy's been established as a top slot guy already. Like maybe it's okay to be a year late on a slot wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, that's just something that doesn't come up when talking about drafting positions. And I think that is important is, like I said, running backs are immediate contributors. You're going to get a lot out of them during their rookie contracts. Whereas like Devontae Parker, was basically a bust until right when he was, about to get paid or just got paid. And you see that a lot with wide receivers, slot wide receivers on those charts. It's a ton of guys who were drafted in the 7th round or went undrafted. It wasn't a lot of highly drafted guys. And part of that is, of course, teams do devalue slot wide receivers. That's just a fact. This is a unique class because so many of these it's a great class, but so many of these wide receivers profile as majority slot or predominant slot. Just to, go back a little bit, you talked about the repeat seasons. You could argue that that's related to wear and tear. I don't know how much I buy that, but just from a dynasty perspective, when I do a startup, I just don't draft running backs at all. Like I do the tank and bank strategy where, I'm trying to finish dead last in year one and then just dominate for like 8 years, stockpile rookie picks, things of that nature. And where do I want running backs? I want to draft them in the rookie draft. That's what I'm trying to do. And then when a guy hits year 5, let's say year 4, year 5, then, all right, let me sell at peak, get some rookie picks, draft a new young running back and go from there. So that's my typical strategy.
All makes sense. So when evaluating those rookie running backs, I just read your recent articles and I know you have the paywall. You obviously deserve to get paid very well for that content. So if there is stuff that goes too deep into that paywall and you kind of want to let the listeners and the viewers go behind there to take a look at your article, I totally understand, but I still thought there was some really important stuff to talk about. So you talked about the impact of athleticism from position to position, and it seemed for wide receiver it was totally irrelevant.
Yeah. So, if you want to play with the samples, you can argue that athleticism is actually bad. Like if you just look at all round 2 wide receivers drafted since 2000, the less you jump in the broad jump, the slower you run the 40-yard dash and the 3-cone, the better you are at fantasy football. Like you're like twice as good if you just look at the least athletic guys versus the most athletic guys. It's just, so the question is, how much does athleticism matter? And the answer is, oh my God, athleticism matters so much because every player in the NFL is a 99th percentile athlete among all living human beings. But then if you look within, combine invite players, athleticism doesn't matter at all because guess what? They're all 99th percentile. And you're just like the guys who are super athletic. There's 4 different guys. There's guys who are not good and not athletic. There's guys who are extremely good and athletic like Julio Jones. And then there's guys in between where they have tangibles and intangibles. Like they're phenomenal route runners, but maybe they run a slow 3-cone or they run a really fast 3-cone, but they have work ethic concerns, things of that nature. So the numbers don't really bear it out, but I think I created a stat that sort of focuses only on the most predictive, most important events and weights them appropriately for each position.
And that stat, I believe, is the SPORQ score, if I'm referring to it properly.
Yeah.
It's SPORQ as opposed to the SPARQ score, SPARQ. And so, again, I know you get into this some in your articles, but whatever you can tell us.
Yeah, don't worry about the paywall. We can talk about this all day.
Awesome. So what is SPORQ? How did you create it? Why does it matter? Like, just unleash.
Yeah, so this isn't anything new. Shout out to Math Bomb, who does RAS. Shout out to Hayden Winks, who does adjusted SPARQ. It's just kind of the same thing. SPARQ score, I think, is really bad. It doesn't really appropriately weight the most important positions. It doesn't do it from a fantasy perspective, and it doesn't do it for each unique position. Like you have to think that, the 3-cone doesn't matter as much for an offensive guard as it does a running back or a wide receiver. So just making those adjustments, I looked at all the correlations. You can look at that in the article, but really it's just my model, what it spits out, an all-encompassing score measuring athleticism based on what's most predictive, most important for each position and from a fantasy perspective. But at the end of the day, the answer to my big article was like athleticism still is pretty overrated. College production is going to matter more than athleticism. At the polar extremes, it matters a lot. And you could see that from the charts I posted. But like on the whole, definitely more overrated, especially within the dynasty community than not.
Yeah. So based on those charts, based on those scores, who were some people that like really stood out to this year? Maybe some players that should be targeted that the community, the consensus, it seems like is overlooking. Like I noticed, especially with the tight ends, there seemed like there were some guys where it's like, I had no idea that person was that athletic, especially compared to Kyle Pitts. Like there were some people that really leaped up there who were not had the last name Howard.
Yeah. So wide receiver matters. Athleticism matters a lot less for wide receivers than running backs and tight ends. For tight ends, it matters the most. You really see that. So we can talk about a bunch of risers. Elijah Mitchell rose, I think, more than any other running back. Sidney Fehoko jumped, I think, more than any other wide receiver. And then, Travis Etienne, 95th percentile sports score. So, feel really good about his prospects in the NFL. Kenny Nwangwu, he's a good sleeper. Chris Evans as well. Wide receivers, Jamar Chase, shocking me, the most athletic wide receiver in this class. That's amazing. That's so exciting. There were a lot of athletic wide receivers in this class, though. Kadarius Toney, too, a guy a lot of people are shaky on. You have to feel a lot better about him after his elite pro day. Like I said, Sidney Fehoko, big-time riser. If you want to take a long shot sleeper, Jalen Camp, Josh Emertober-Bebe. I don't know how to pronounce that, but you know who I'm talking about. The guy you wanted me to talk about is the guy who I am desperate to talk about is Jacob Harris, who is so exciting. I remember when Jeff Janis was worth a round 1 and a round 2 rookie pick, even though he never did anything. It was just, he's the next Jordy Nelson. He's so athletic. Oh my God, he can't catch the ball, but don't worry about that. Don't worry about the drops. But Jacob Harris is a guy you can get so cheap. And the majority of my dynasty leagues are tight end premium. And so he's going undrafted. So I'll take him in the 5th round of the rookie draft, maybe the late 4th. But man, athleticism off the charts. He's skinny. He's 15 pounds skinnier than Evan Ingram, who's the skinniest tight end in recent years to have a tight end 1 season. That's a concern, but I found that weight negatively correlates to fantasy points for the tight end position. I think that makes sense intuitively. The more wide receiver like you are, the better you are for fantasy. So not as concerned with that as I would be a Devonta Smith or a Tutu Atwell, where that is a big, serious red flag, but just all of his numbers off the charts. And if you want to list him as a wide receiver, 99th percentile wide receiver. The bad, he's really old. He's 24 years old. He dropped 18% of his catchable targets. Pitts was
so he's a lot like Evan Ingram.
Yeah.
A lot like Evan Ingram, a lot like
That's
Jeff
what
Janis.
we were talking about for a second. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Hey,
So
Pro Bowler Evan Ingram. Let's put respect on the name.
Hey. He also, by the way, had a patellar tendon injury last year. So I don't know. We have a great injury expert over at Fantasy Points, Edwin Porras, who found that the immediate year after, a guy who suffered that injury produces 80% in line with their historical norms. And that's exactly what happened with Evan Ingram. And he found the year after it's closer to 95%. I'm not a big Evan Ingram fan, but that is cause for some optimism. But yeah, Jacob Harris, he's just Dane Brugler says he's going to get drafted in round 4. So, hey, with that draft capital, it's exciting at least, very raw, don't expect much, but who knows, he could be the next Robert Tonyan.
Okay. Well, definitely something to keep an eye out on then. Who then has the biggest red flags? Who was through your research is just I don't know about this one anymore. Actually, for me, the one that was the most interesting that stood out was Jarrett Patterson, not doing so hot on the athleticism scores. And I know people had kind of already pegged him as not being super athletic, but this was a way to quantify, oh shit.
Yeah. So it also factors in height, not so much for running backs, but weight and BMI as well. And he wasn't great there. Puka Williams, extraordinarily so. So I broke it down in the articles less severe red flags and then death knell red flags, where Demetric Felton is the 9th least athletic running back of 600 qualifiers since the year 2000. So just totally off my board. Jarrett Patterson, like you said, Puka Williams. The wide receivers, I just had to assign an arbitrary, percentage to penalize them. And that was Tutu Atwell, Rondale Moore, Devonta Smith. That's a concern. It's a big concern. Apparently the NFL doesn't care too much. They all, really good by projected draft capital, but just looking at the thresholds and, similar comparisons based on height and weight, it's not looking pretty for those guys.
Yeah. So actually, you mentioned Rondale Moore. The burning question that I'm sure the fantasy community as a whole is dying to know: which Moore are you taking? Are you taking Elijah or Rondale?
Yeah. So I have a dynasty partner, TJ Calkins. He's just the best dynasty player in the game. Better than me, better than anyone I've ever seen. He has Rondale Moore as the wide receiver 1. So I actually own more Rondale than my guy this year is Elijah Moore, who I am just like madly in love with. But TJ is the mastermind. He works all the trade deals and stuff like that. I also don't want to handle commish duties, so he handles that. But Elijah's my guy. I'd definitely take him over Rondale. I actually have him not a tier above, but I have him like 2 spots above. I could talk about Elijah all day. I think he's being massively slept on. Size concerns, but a high level athlete by anything you want to look at. Elite, historically great 3-cone, great 40-yard dash time, great short shuttle time. But the production, so year 1, he's an immediate contributor alongside DK Metcalf and AJ Brown, who are 2 to 3 years older than him. The next year, one of the best age-adjusted yardage market share seasons in my database, better than Rashad Bateman's, 4.4 times as many receiving yards as the next closest receiver. And this is my favorite stat. I haven't heard this anywhere else, but it blows my mind. The most yards from scrimmage per game of any wide receiver since at least 2000, and I think ever, belongs to Elijah Moore last year. This guy, he's a PPR cheat code, 10.3 receptions per game last year. And then he also led all wide receivers in deep receiving yards per game, top 3 in yards per deep target. He has the wheels. He has, the elite wheels to also bring that vertical dimension that we've seen from Tyler Lockett, early career T.Y. Hilton. So put it all together, and slot wide receivers don't matter. But again, we're not talking fantasy. And man, I love me some Elijah.
So basically what you're saying is you hope Peter Schrager's right and he does go to the Packers, even though they have a history of not giving Rodgers any weapons.
So I mocked actually Rondale to the Packers just because his big concern is diminutive size and the small catch radius, and you have the most accurate passer in football. That's not really a concern. I had my buddy Brett Whitefield on the pod. He said if Elijah Moore goes to the Packers, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. So I love that. I'm hearing whispers that Jacksonville is going to take him with their second pick, but Urban Meyer just loves speed. But he's going to go a lot earlier than people think. So what's his nickname though? That's the question. Elijah the Ghost. I had another good one. I don't know. We'll come up with one.
Man, apparently Urban Meyer also loves his wide receivers, because that will now be Chark, Visca, Moore, and Marvin Jones. That just sounds like a fantasy nightmare.
Crazy,
trying
right?
to pick who's going to be coming out of there. I was talking to one of our mutual friends, Andrew Metcalf, who's fire fantasy content, produces content with LQ here at Real Deal Fantasy. And I'm just like, wide receiver trios have serious caps. They don't produce wide receiver 1s. They produce at best wide receiver 15s. So you're talking about middling wide receiver 2. The evidence is there for at least the past, I think, 5 years. I haven't gone deeper than that. And I'm just it doesn't mean these guys will necessarily be bad, but you are taking someone who has a guaranteed ceiling, potentially, when you could be taking someone who has more upside. And so
you're talking about slot wide receivers?
Just wide receivers in general. So for example, the difference between going with someone like Calvin and Julio, where it's a wide receiver duo, versus Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Deontay Johnson, where it's a wide receiver trio. And so you're talking about if Elijah Moore goes to Jacksonville, this would be potentially a wide receiver quad. It's from a fantasy perspective, the ceiling cap there is
right.
It's insurmountable.
Target competition.
It's it doesn't matter how good you are. At a certain point, there are literally only so many plays that can be run, and therefore only so many targets. Even with the Cowboys, who seem to be committed to throwing the ball more than any team in NFL history. And it helps that they have a defense that will allow them to do that. Like even they can't produce like, a wide receiver one with CeeDee Lamb and Amari and Michael Gallup on the roster. Like it's too difficult.
I think we've seen it work though with Brandon Cooks, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, barring injury.
That was the thing. Barring injury, Kupp then becomes the wide receiver 15 in points per game, and the others are then behind him. So it's still a cap of around wide receiver 15.
Yeah.
And if you include the injury, then Kupp is like way off the board because he only played 8 games, but he still had like a phenomenal like 16 plus points per game in PPR, which was absurd. All right, we'll move on. Some group activities. Scott's obviously talked a ton about rookies, so LQ, I'm actually going to jump to this segment real quick so you can get your thoughts in as well. Ooh. Trending up, trending down. Who is a rookie you've got trending up in value right now as you've been taking in some more information leading into the draft?
Oh, man. I should jump in the tight ends. Everybody loves Pitts and all that other stuff, but I'm starting to like and fall in love with Hunter Long. And I can honestly see the Rams, cooking things up and actually taking him some way because, the Rams love their tight ends. They love to bring in, Bryce Hopkins to replace Everett. Then we got Tyler Higbee, in that realm. We want him to break out. We want him to be this baby Gronk, baby Kelsey and all this other stuff, all the names that he was giving coming into the league. I think Hunter Long can sit in that, place right there and we take him and groom him a little bit. And then once Tyler Higbee contract is up, it's, curtains for him. So watching his highlights in the recent weeks, man, I'm starting to like Hunter Long a lot. He's coming up in my board.
What about you, Scott? What do you think about Hunter Long? I'm curious.
Yeah, I like him. He was a specifically tricky eval for me just because it was night and day between his 2019 and 2020 season, but screams of upside. So 2019, he had the second best. So PFF College has been grading college prospects since 2014. And over that span, he has their second best yards per route run season. Kyle Pitts last year ranks first. Hunter Long's 2019 ranked second. That year also second best in yards after the catch per reception, second best in, I think, yards per target. Also an elite grade. But then 2020 just completely fell off the map. His yards per target average was basically cut in half, 35% more yards on 123% more targets. But he did see a crazy ton of targets. His 24% target share is like a wide receiver one level, one of the highest marks by any tight end in a really long time. He saw 17 targets in one game. So do we penalize him then for the lack of efficiency, or do we praise him for seeing like wide receiver one levels of volume? I don't really know, but I like him a lot as well. I have him right now, my tight end 3. A big thing was I expected him to be fairly unathletic. My comp to him was, like Zach Ertz light. Zach Ertz, savvy route runner, not very athletic. But actually he comped as like a Mark Andrews clone. He like the same exact height, weight, 43 cone bench. So he was a riser for me in the spork thing as well.
Well, we definitely got to find him the right QB if he's a Mark Andrews clone, because that just has tight end one future written all over it. Okay, so LQ then trending down. Who's the rookie that you got trending down? You're like going like, I thought I really liked this guy, but now I'm not so sure.
Oh man, I honestly don't have the answer to that, man. I can't think of anybody right now that I feel like, for me personally, that I think will be trending down. I haven't, like the combine not being, there, and then the lack of, me actually caring about rookies without having landing spots, but it all comes down to that.
So actually, how about then this? I'll throw one out to you because I feel like people are trending down on him in general. Chuba Hubbard. I hear his name a lot. I actually hear his name a lot, but he used to be like evaluated as being like around a pick 50 guy. I think I saw him mocked around pick 51, something like that. And now he's like in the 100+ range. And I'm just like going, what's happening here?
What happened over the weekend that I missed? That's one of those things.
Well, Scott, actually, then what are your thoughts on Hubbard?
Yeah, so that was another very tricky eval for me, just because my model, when I ran it last year, said Hubbard was like a top 5 running back if he came out in last year's class. And now my model absolutely hated him, didn't have him in the top, 8 or 9. And so it's tough because the guy had, 2 years ago, nearly 2,300 yards from scrimmage, 351 touches, 21 touchdowns. And if you look at all the running backs to have a 2,000 rushing yard season, it's like all the best ones. It's CMC, Ray Rice, J.K. Dobbins, Tomlinson, Henry, Taylor, Melvin, and it's just like very few busts. And then last year, really not so great. You could blame that on injuries, his injuries, the starting quarterback's injuries. It's really tough. One thing I noticed with his great 2,000-yard season was he wasn't very efficient by any stat that matters to me in my model, which is missed tackles forced per touch, yards after contact per attempt, things of that nature, very mediocre. And then last year he was like bottom 7 of like 120 qualifiers. It was really, really scary. So was this a guy who just succeeded on raw volume, and in which case isn't a very exciting prospect? Or, hey, he showed he can, withstand a robust workload, and he can get the raw production that matters. So at the end of the day, I think I have him in that third tier, but like right above Ramondre Stevenson in that third tier as my RB7. I think. Okay. I mean, it's just like it's like a swing for the fences upside pick, but I'm not holding my breath.
Do you have a particular team you have him going towards at this point?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay. Just figured I'd ask.
The top 3 running backs, you can kind of like, cross your fingers for specific teams. And then after that, it's just like, hey, hope you get lucky. And it's not like, the Giants draft him and he does nothing behind Saquon Barkley for forever.
That would be rough, though. They do have, I think, a hole to fill there. I know Herms, my partner in crime. Okay, he hopes for Najee sometimes, as Lateral bots pointed out here, but really he's hoping for Ramondre Stevenson. I know that's someone he's really hoping, like, little less draft capital involved. Maybe can just learn behind Kalen Ballage, future RB1 Kalen Ballage. But that's interesting that you still have Hubbard ahead of Stevenson. I like Ballage in general for redraft next year. I think he'll have potential, especially depending on who Pittsburgh drafts. Of course, Pittsburgh could go out and draft Najee Harris, and Ballage will be nothing. Speaking of redraft sleepers, Scott, we'll start with you, and then LQ, I'll go to you. Who is a non-rookie?
Hey guys, I just lost audio, so can someone else take this and I'll figure it out?
It's okay. You have somebody on deck. It's your old pal Herms. Aha! Look at me. Okay. There it is. Coming into the rescue. Any non-rookie redraft sleepers that you guys have in your mind? I know it's before the NFL draft, so like certain situations could change. Because, like, for instance, a guy I really like is Josh Reynolds with the Titans. But hey, if they pick somebody in the draft in the top 3 rounds, oh no, it could be useless. But yeah, just any early redraft sleepers that either of you have in mind.
Yeah, Scott, we can start with you. I had a rogue mute button. It turns out is what happened.
Oh, okay.
You didn't lose audio. I lost the plot.
I will say, quarterback Jalen Hurts. I know that the Eagles, like, allegedly aren't ready to commit to him as their starting quarterback, but I don't see any other way. He ranked second among all quarterbacks in fantasy points per start last season, 25.9. The Konami code is king at the end of the day. I don't care. They're probably going to trade Zach Ertz during the draft. The weapons there are uninspiring. They might be tanking. Give me that Konami code upside. Also, I like the player. I think he's an underrated player. So he's currently being drafted like QB 12 or QB 13, which is typically when I draft a quarterback. I almost always want to be the last team to draft a quarterback. And then now that we're in the Konami code era, things change up a little bit. But I mean, if Jalen Hurts is there at QB 12, QB 13, I'm going to pounce on that. And then maybe also draft, Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill in my last 2 picks, just in case, because I think one of those guys have a really good shot at being a QB1.
That sounds like a phenomenal strategy. And as I said earlier this year, if the Eagles drafted a QB at pick 6, I would let someone hit me in the face with a 6-inch meatball sub. As they now have pick 12, it's now a foot long, people. The debt is still out there. I ain't getting hit with a meatball sub. They ain't drafting a QB there. They might draft a QB later in the draft, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Oh, dear God.
Hey, you know what?
That's wild.
Best case scenario, I'm right. Worst case scenario, free meatball sub. It's a win-win.
You're not wrong.
All right, LQ, what about you? Who is your redraft sleeper, non-rookie?
Non-rookie, I mean, I had 2. I had a wide receiver. Josh Reynolds would be the obvious, but
Yes.
with, Hearn said they could draft wide receiver, so that knocks that out of there. But Melvin Gordon, man, I really think, Mike Boone signing over there, he doesn't really have that much competition. Mike Boone is not as good as Lindsey. So Lindsey more so is the pest in that, in that backfield. But Melvin Gordon is looking like the lone wolf there with an ADP sitting around like the 4th, 5th round. You could really get him as a solid RB2. So you won't have to worry about that RB2 position. So I really think, guys like Joe Mixon that are getting the hate right now that are falling in the 3rd round, like he's falling in that same, category of having that same like weirdly hate for him for what reason? You know what I mean? So at least in Denver, they have, the tools to have a solid running game. Them signing Mike Boone was just insurance or whatever. Melvin Gordon has the injury history as well. So got to have a guy back there, right, that can step up and show out. Because we honestly, with Melvin Gordon, we had our times where we were loving Melvin Gordon, 10 touchdowns. He was the goal line guy. He was getting all these touchdowns. I think that can happen, this season with the turnaround. Hopefully Denver gets a quarterback though.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you were saying Mike Boone not as good as Philip Lindsay, I was about to just stop you at not good. Like, I don't think he's good. Scott, you're the stats guy. If you've seen something about Mike Boone that I'm not, please enlighten me. I'd love to be proven wrong. But I watch the guy and I'm just like, that's a jag. Not only is it a jag, it might be a future jag. Like if he puts on teal and you hear Duval behind him, it's not going to surprise me.
That's when you know.
Yeah, I mean, again, Scott, is there anything you've seen on Mike Boone that maybe the group here is missing?
Yeah, I mean, I think he ranks like 8th best in yards per carry since 2018, 5.3. So, clearly he's elite. No, I mean.
Of course, yes, obviously, Small sample size matters, everybody. Small sample size.
All right. Well, Herms, we've got you on the show, so we might as well ask, why should we care about Josh Reynolds?
You see, okay, the myth around vacated targets is true. It really is. It's something that I've looked into and I've heard a lot of feedback on. So, like, whenever people are just like, oh, well, they're vacated targets and it seems somebody has to take them, it's like, well, it depends on who the player is that leaves and who the player is that comes in to replace said player who left. So, in my mind, I think that Josh Reynolds could be somebody who could step in and be the Corey Davis type of receiver in that offense. That's something, I don't know. That's largely what my prediction is predicated on. I think that the skill set of Josh Reynolds fits well with what the Titans do. The only concern I really have, aside from the obvious in that, well, I mean, if they draft a wide receiver in the first couple rounds, then the whole thing's ruined. But if that ends up, working out just fine, then the concern that I would have is that the 1 year we have of the new Titans offensive coordinator, whose name I do not remember, was he was with then the Oakland Raiders while Jack Del Rio was there, and it was a year in which Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper both had split targets in a very, very irritating quantity. So not only could it potentially hurt Josh Reynolds, but it could also hurt A.J. Brown, and that's the last thing I want. I want A.J. Brown to be good. He's such a good player. He's so good. Oh, my gosh. But anyway, I don't know. That's kind of the logic behind the Josh Reynolds thing. It's just like, I mean, let's be real. Who else is there? I mean, Anthony Ferguson? Sure, I guess. Fine. But, well, I don't know, man. Somebody has to do it, and I think he's good.
Herms, I've got good news for you. I don't think the scheme is going to hurt Josh Reynolds that much because he'll be behind Terrence Marshall, and it won't matter.
Terrence Marshall to the Titans would be a perfect fit.
I am convinced they're going to take a wide receiver in round one.
They have to, because Josh Reynolds is not that developed. I mean,
I could be wrong.
The Rams put him in to step up and show out. Like Van Jefferson shouldn't have been seeing the field at all if Josh Reynolds has been there for X amount of years, 4 years. You would think he'll pop off now. When Brandon Cooks went out with a concussion, we put Josh Reynolds in. He wasn't creating separation. Goff was not looking his way. You're not going to put that, that sophomore or even his freshman year, that responsibility on him if he can't create separation. Like, that's just what it is. So to me, I feel like he's just a tall wide receiver that you want him to go deep, but he just isn't that guy. So they're definitely drafting a wide receiver.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So, Scott, your thoughts on Josh Reynolds and his potential in 2021?
Yeah, I think he's a great best ball pick. I don't think he's a great, redraft start sit pick. I just don't think the upside's there with him to be, an every week starter, which is all you want. Upside wins championship.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And again,
I thought it was a great, very passionate, colorful monologue, though. That was great.
Well, thank you. That's what I do best.
It's what he does best. And again, Herms, the other thing I would say is last I checked on the Titans website, LaFleur is still the offensive coordinator. So I don't know who the new guy is either. Like, they don't update their stuff.
Yeah, I was talking about it with our buddy Jordan Vanek, and he was the one that mentioned that. Also, follow him at Jordan Vanek 1. Super nice guy. I will say though, real quickly, my real answer is speaking of former Rams, tight end Gerald Everett now with the Seahawks. That's my sleeper dude right there. I'm with that.
Schrager.
Okay, LQ does not like the Everett pick. LQ
Schrager.
Is that okay? So that's bias. What do you objectively think?
Man, I really don't know.
That tells me what I need to know.
I don't know.
Scott, are you similar on Everett? Just to like, No,
I like Everett.
Okay,
exciting. Yeah.
Positive for Everett. Anything in particular that stands out with him that you like?
He was elite in a number of stats that are important to me. He really popped in my tight end model back in college. One of the best ever at missed tackles forced per reception, yards after the catch per reception. I didn't do much in Los Angeles, but at the same time, he held Tyler Higbee back, and Higbee was, unreal on that 4-game stretch. I am close friends with Danny Kelly, who, loves Gerald Everett. We co-manage a couple of teams together. He made me draft Everett on both of them. There's a path to targets there. No other tight end in Seattle moves the needle for me. So yeah, I could see him being, he's probably really cheap. So yeah, solid pick.
And plus, 3 out of the last 4 years, or maybe 4 out of the last 5. I always get this number mixed up. Seattle targets the tight end position at least 100 times every year. So, it's normally a hodgepodge of dudes. But if Everett ends up being the guy to take over that role entirely, all unto himself, boom!
Yeah, he's got a shot.
He's no Jimmy Graham, though.
That's facts.
I think at one point, Will Dissly was averaging 18 fantasy points per game over the 10 games he didn't
2 years
suffer a game-ending injury. Yeah.
I had Travis Kelce, so I was literally flexing Will Dissly in a league. That's how ridiculous it is.
It's true. I can confirm.
And so I like Everett. I think there's some potential there. I think it's certainly worth a dart throw if you're going to just pass on tight end. Why not? And if it's good enough for the Ringer Zone Danny Kelly, it's good enough for me as far as I'm concerned.
Hey, you heard it here first.
That's just seal of approval right there. All right, let's focus on some guys that aren't quite as much dart throws. Scott, who is your way too early 2021 fantasy MVP?
Oh man. I really have no idea. Can you just come back to me?
I will come back to you. Herms, we know you can vamp. Who is your way too early 2021 fantasy MVP?
Oh, geez, I'll tell you what there, buddy. I already talked about him a little bit earlier. It's my man, A.J. Brown. I really
Are you
think
going to say Josh Reynolds again?
it's my man, Josh Reynolds, future wide receiver 1, of course. Yeah, no. His teammate, A.J. Brown. I mean, we've seen flashes of his brilliance thus far in his young career. And at this point, I mean, like, yes, like, who else? Who else? Oh my Lord, if he ends up with the type of volume that I expect him to end up with, especially because like he's a yak machine. This is what he does. I mean, he's built different, man. Like he's just so good at everything. Oh my God. I have him in my early, way too early redraft rankings as my wide receiver 3 overall. I think that this dude is in for some shit. I don't know. I don't really have a lot to go off right now in terms of like fancy numbers and stuff because, like I said, I'm still really early. I'm so sorry, but
it's way too early.
Just straight up, like just look at what's in front of him. I mean, come on, dude. In limited target share already, he ends up just like balling out.
Wide
so
receiver
like
6 points per game in PPR formats last year, if I remember.
There you go. So yeah, I mean, come on, dude. AJ, dude, we're gonna be looking at him a year from now. Just like, oh my God. He's a stud muffin. My favorite type of muffin right there behind Banana Nut. I mean, I am just, it's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm kind of a blueberry guy myself. But speaking of what's right in front of me, LQ is right in front of me. LQ, who is your way too early fantasy MVP for 2021?
I'm going to spice it up. I'm going Joe Mixon, man. Joe Mixon is going to be the guy. He's the value right now in the 3rd round. That ADP in redraft is just wildly disrespectful. And I feel like people are not really paying attention to why he's going to be the fantasy MVP. I mean, the obvious, narrative I can throw at you right now, Gio Bernard's out of the way. So vacated targets. But let's be honest, when Mixon was healthy, he still was out targeting Gio Bernard when he was there existing those 2 years that we were seeing RB13 and RB10. So therefore, with the healthy Mixon, with the new and improved O-line, hopefully, they go to the draft, they take that pick as well.
Please.
And, Jonah Williams, they invested in 2019. It didn't work out. Missed the entire rookie season. We know that. Came back, only played 10 games. December, he ended up in the IR. So that's unfortunate. So they have the pieces there. It's not like the Bengals haven't tried to help that O-line. They just couldn't stay healthy. You know what I mean? So injury is there. So barring injury, man, I got Joe Mixon to the moon, man, because he's going to see those targets out of the backfield. Upgraded quarterback in Burrow. Hopefully no rehab setbacks, barring injury as well. But the wide receiver core is amazing. That ball is going to be moving. More opportunities, way more scoring opportunities for Mixon as well.
To the moon.
I think that's a great answer, and I'm expecting another great answer here. Scott, way too early. 2021 fantasy MVP. Who you got?
Yeah, so if it's a fantasy MVP, the chances are it's like 90% going to be a running back. Running back, that's where your league winners come from. Specifically, typically bell cow running backs, with the exception of Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb, who get those targets, never leave the field. Targets, 2.83 times as much as a carry. That's how much they're worth in PPR leagues. It's going to be one of these guys. It's going to be a sophomore running back. It's not going to be Jonathan Taylor. His ADP is too high. I worry about the committee situation.
Oh, hell
it's
yeah.
Either Clyde Edwards-Helaire, although I don't really think it's him as much as I loved him last year. The Chiefs made a run at Gio Bernard. It seems like they're not so happy with him. Deandre Swift, I mean, it's a tanking Lions offense, but at the same time, my sources are telling me that they are going to run the ball like crazy, and they're going to have him lined up as a wide receiver, running wide receiver routes. They envision him as something akin to Alvin Kamara, but also getting an insane amount of carries. And the coaching staff there, the most run-heavy minds in football, just old school as hell. Cam Akers, I mean, my guy last year didn't work out because injuries early on, but you really saw towards the tail end of the season, he was getting that workhorse role. If he is just 80%, 90%, really just 80% of what Todd Gurley was during his peak years with Sean McVay, easy league winner. J.K. Dobbins, I mean, does he see the targets with Lamar Jackson? Probably not, but he's a great bet to lead the league in yards per carry and still, walk away with 1,200 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns. But again, Gus Edwards, severely underrated. Antonio Gibson,
Yes.
what do you have? 10 rushing touchdowns last year. The guy was a former wide receiver in college. Throw him the ball, please. It's one of those guys. If I had to make a pick, I lean Cam Akers, but I'd say Swift is probably the best value as it stands.
I would agree with that sentiment that it's like Cam Akers may be the higher ceiling, but he'll also have the higher ADP, and therefore Swift's value does make him a better MVP candidate.
But Detroit doesn't produce good running backs. Like
Barry Sanders has entered the chat, good sir.
Hey.
When I was a baby.
2013 or Reggie Bush was the last 1,000-yard rusher there.
The point is well taken, and I think it is a fair one. I think for me, there's a chance it's Travis Kelce. I think he's just going to be. I think he's going to be a cheat code at the position again.
Anything is possible.
I would say the other thing though is, at tight end, it really could end up being George Kittle. I think in the expert community, there are less people sleeping on George Kittle. In your home league community, there might be some people sleeping on George Kittle, especially comparative to Kelce, putting up similar points when healthy. Like, again, we all go, look at the talent. Like, come on, look at the talent, look at the production when he's healthy. Like, we're looking at this on a daily basis. But, like, your regular person that you play in your home league with, they might go like, oh, look, he was awful last year. Their quarterback situation was terrible, blah, 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 blah.
What about that Waller guy?
Okay. I think Waller's just enough of a tier below that I was
just adding to the cacophony.
Yeah. So again, if you could get a league where Waller gets picked ahead of Kittle, then like that's fantastic, and I want an invite. But I think one of those two tight ends could really provide you an edge more so than I think like taking a top 2 quarterback would. And I think the other thing for me is like I'm trying to think in my head like who will be the James Robinson type guy where it's just like this guy just comes out of nowhere and like finishes, or honestly even more objectively a David Montgomery guy, someone we were projecting a little higher that ends up still finishing as a top running back.
That's hard to call.
It's hard to think of off the top of my head. Again, like
it's tough. Khalil Herbert. I don't know, maybe.
Well, like, honestly, like Najee Harris as a rookie, like to me is a clear RB1 candidate, not the RB1, but like a top 12 RB guy. And so my concern really with Najee is I feel like he'll be drafted as such. So the value like is the question mark in my mind.
I mean, if he goes to Pittsburgh, there's a case for him in round 1.
So that's the issue. Like he could end up being Clyde Edwards-Helaire type value rather than Jonathan Taylor type value. And if he's Clyde Edwards-Helaire type value, even if he has better production than CEH, it'll be tougher to make a case for him at MVP once the season comes to the end. And that season's going to have 17 games. So real quick, this is the last thing we do before we will sign off. Scott, going to start with you in 1 minute or less. Your thoughts on the 17 game schedule and how it will impact fantasy.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been a long time zero RB hater, but it makes zero RB just a slightly more viable, better chance of injury. Just the grueling end of the season, picking up, you're stacked everywhere, but your running back situation's a mess, and you can just pick up 2 guys, and then in addition to injuries, but also, hey, if there was a 17 game season last year, how many teams would have pumped the brakes, a week earlier and rested their starters a week earlier. So that comes into play as well and benefits the zero RB strategy.
Okay. LQ, minute or less, 17 game schedule, how it'll impact fantasy.
I mean, I like it. I mean, it's more football. I mean, you might get the guys like Gus Edwards, end up having 1,000 yards, which will look crazy as hell. I mean, it's only like 59 yards per game. To get to that now. So I think, with him average, having the 700 yards back to back years, you might see him pop off for, 900,000. So I think you'll see more guys find more value in those later rounds that are having those type of careers and having more value and having more opportunity. And obviously Gus Edwards on, the Ravens, they're like the number 1 running, offense. They're going to run the ball a ton. So I'll definitely take my shot, with a guy like a Gus Edwards in later rounds. So thank you, week 17.
Yeah, I mean, as people who follow the Lateral will know, like, we are full on drivers of the Gus bus. We
Gus bus,
love Gus Edwards here. So I'm all about that. And by the way, you were pretty much spot on. 58.82 yards per game would get you exactly 1,000 yards in a 17
Look at that.
game.
Look at that. Mathematician LQ.
Absolutely love it. And I'm going to love what Herm's got for me. 17 game schedule. How's it going to impact fantasy? Minute or less? Go.
Oh my God. Oh, probably the running back thing. Honestly, I feel like, because we're already seeing the dying breed of the bell cow. So, we're going to see people being a little more careful with their running backs, I would imagine. But, because like the wear and tear of the position is already ever present due to the nature of just how it works. So, you could definitely see some of that. You could also see potentially, I haven't seen much information as to whether or not there is going to be an additional bye week, but if not, you could potentially see a team being like, hey, you know what? Screw it. We'll just rest the quarterback randomly in week 13. And it's just like, oh, geez, what do we do? And then you're going to have to figure it out from there. It's possible. I'm not saying it will happen, but it is possible. So it's like, I don't know, be on the lookout for that type of stuff. It could get tricky. So it's like, I don't know, man. Just like basically now more than ever, just like be alert. Keep those eyes on the waiver wire peeled. Do all that stuff. I mean, like, you're going to, depth at every position is going to be everything. And like your, whatever knowledge base that you're working with, expand it a little more. I don't know. That's my weird prediction.
Yeah. So and Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I believe there will be no second bye week, correct? That's been determined as far as I can tell.
Yeah. I don't know. I was really rooting for just like a 1 week off, no football whatsoever in the middle of the season.
Oh,
just so I could
all-star
break.
A full siesta.
Right.
Wow.
Just want to catch my breath. So it's not like, but there's no way the pass up that money. I have no idea about the second
$1 bill, y'all.
I think, okay. So for me, my even 30 seconds or less, as far as I've read, no second bye week. And I think that's borderline set in stone, but keep an eye out. That could change. Herms is right. The correct thing is time management. And we've seen it in the NBA. Stars getting rested. There's obviously way more opportunities in an NBA season than an NFL season. But do not be surprised if you see Devontae Adams still not play 16 games this year. Like, do not be surprised to see some guys sit a game that maybe wouldn't normally sit a game because they can afford to do so. Like, you need to have depth at running back, at wide receiver. You need to be prepared for a guy being out that would have maybe toughed it through in 16 games. That's my take on it. Time management, load management could become a thing.
Boom. True. I'm with it.
Okay. Well, that wraps up our show. So I'm going to just go around the horn for this one. Scott, thank you so much for coming on. It means the world to us. You've been a phenomenal guest, bringing just all that knowledge to us. Please feel free to plug any content you got coming up, anything you want people to check out.
Yeah, we've got the Greg Cassell draft guide over at fantasypoints.com. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe there. You can find me on Twitter at Scott Barrett DFB. That's about it.
Yep. I actually have subscribed recently, and it has been phenomenal content. I am looking forward to seeing what comes out the rest of the season. LQ, speaking of phenomenal content, what you got coming up?
That's facts.
Hey, man, I got a lot of fire content coming out after the draft. I got a lot of things cooking out with the T-shirts. I got, badges, coasters, keychains, stickers, whatever you got, man. I'm going to be pushing out a lot of merchandise in the next 2-3 weeks. So you can find me at Real Deal Fantasy HQ on Instagram, Real Deal Fantasy on Twitter, YouTube. Subscribe, book it, buy it, bring home the gold.
Awesome. So Herms, I think I'll go first, and then we'll wrap up with you.
100%.
Okay. So I'm McLateral at McLateralFF on the Twitter. You can find our content at thelateralff.com. We've had some articles recently. We should have some more coming up. I'm still working on my perfect draft where I try and build the perfect team using logic retroactively. And I think that's going to be interesting to see what I can find, including that, like when Herms took Jonathan Taylor in the 4th round, might have been the right move. Pretty smart pick.
Look at me.
And we actually, I think we'll have some content coming up that's going to be more on the AV side of things. So Herms, if you want to go ahead and plug that stuff, I'm going to get the hang of which side is which one day.
It's very difficult. You got to get used to that. Hey, we can practice after this. Anyway, you can find me on the tweeter at Herms NFL. You can also find my show, The Show with No Name, on Sundays, including this Sunday, in which we will be having Jeff Bell from Fantasy Pros and also Felix Sharp from the Campus to Canton doing all that stuff. I mean, like, come on. It's almost the NFL draft, people. We got to start talking more about these prospects, even though a lot of us already have been, including tonight. But yeah, if you're interested in more of that type of stuff with some people who, dive deep and do all the college stuff, check it out. It'll be fun. We're going to talk about it from a redraft perspective because that's what we do for the most part around here at the Lateral. But yeah, it's going to be super fun. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, dude, just so much fun.
I think we got
stuff.
something else coming up on Sunday. Do we want to tease that? The maybe mock draft we're going to be doing with a buddy of ours?
Oh, yes, of course. So my co-host, Jesse, he is the proud founder of the Bacon Games Fantasy Sports Podcast. We will be doing a crossover event, the Lateral, Bacon Games Fantasy Sports. Boom! We're going to have a super fun real-life NFL mock draft that we're going to be doing. I don't know if it's going to be live or with trades. It's like... I don't know if we're going to be dropping it as it's his thing. If he's going to be dropping it as a live thing or as a podcast, but either way, just be on the lookout for that. That's going to be super cool. And also coming up a week from today, we're going to have the full Lateral staff all around to do the NFL draft extravaganza mega show special thing that, basically everybody's going to be doing. But we hope that you choose to spend your time with us because we're fun, right? Tell us we're fun. Please validate me. But yeah,
if you want to see me lose my shit on camera, tune in around pick 3. It's going to either be like pure hysteria of joy or pure hysteria of madness. But as a Niners fan, I like Mac Jones. I want Justin Fields. It's like there's just such a clear difference in talent to me. I want Justin Fields. That guy is so good. Anyway, this is a preview of things to come.
Exactly. And hey, we got our buddy FYF Josh coming on from the Front Yard Fantasy people. He's going to be on the show. That's going to be fun. So,
we may have some additional special guests. We're working on that. We'll see what happens. We might
maybe
even
not.
have people
Who
just
knows?
stopping for a pick. But yeah, I think that's everything. Again, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. LQ, thank you so much for coming on. It means the world to us. And with that, we're done. That's it. Show's over. You can go home.
Peace out, Cub Scouts.